Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Queer Network. This is Queer Conversations, and I'm Justin Gerhard.
And I'm Eddie Fritz.
And this week we have Rahim Thawer back on the network to talk about open relationships and just that whole conversation of what that means within a relationship to open it up. So we're going to dive back in because we've been talking about sex before with you on the Queer Talk Show, and we just had to have you back to talk about something that is just so much more layered and nuanced.
We're kind of calling this, open relationships 101. And it's like, let's just, start from, a couple who, has been monogamous for a while, and now are either one of them or both of them are starting to talk about opening up their relationship. How do they do that? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Before we talk about how people get into open relationships, I think we really need to take a step back and talk about why. I think there's an assumption, that people want to be in open relationships just because we're gay men and gay men want to have a lot of sex. And I think that's a small portion of it. It's not just about sex. I think it's more dynamic than that. It's about unique kinds of connections that people can make that are difficult to kind of like conjure up in a long-term relationship, right? When you're in a long-term relationship, you have like established patterns, routines, ways of communicating. And then there's something like really exciting about meeting somebody new and not knowing that much about them, right? So I don't think it's just about the sex, it's about who you get to be in that dynamic, the way you get to flirt when you don't have a long-term pre-existing dynamic with somebody. It's like an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And for folks who are also, they think very much about themselves as being able to love more than one person, then it comes to the conversation about how do we say we want to do this thing? Now, number one, I think we have to be ready to have our partners say no. Like, no, I don't want to do this, or this doesn't work for me, right? And it's also important to talk about why you want to be in the open relationship. And if you have hesitations or reservations, why not? So
can we just go back to, the motivations behind wanting to be in an open relationship? As your fire alarm goes off, ladies and gentlemen, the beauty of doing something live is that we have fire alarms, we have dogs barking, we have, all kinds of things. So we're just going to keep going.
So a big part of it is sex, right? Like we want to have sex with different people. It feels different. We want to experience different bodies, different types of people. I often think that, we reduce it to this idea that we just want to have sex. And that's part of it, But I think about sex as not just one act. There's a before, there's a during, there's an after, and it's imbued with all kinds of feelings, right? So I think people who want to open up the relationship want to experience more of that, the range of like erotic desire, if that makes sense.
Why do you think that our community has, the queer community has said, this isn't cheating anymore. This is just an open relationship. That's part of, we talked about on your last episode, just like innovating a relationship is part of what the queer community has done because we don't have the same bounds. Maybe there's no children. Maybe you don't live together necessarily. Like there's so many ways for us to be in a relationship. So it's just definitely to me a part of this conversation about why somebody would even want an open relationship.
Yeah, I think, you know what, for better or for worse, I think it's absolutely more normalized in our community. And to be fair, it really stresses a lot of gay men out, right? Like it's normalized to be in an open relationship and not everybody wants to. So it has a negative impact for some folks. We've been forced to be innovative around relationships. Like I've said before, I think our sexuality is what's been attacked and surveilled for so long that being able to have sex is a way to reclaim our bodies and to reclaim our desires, not being, unnatural or against nature or any of that. It's like we're in control of that.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around any other reason other than really wanting sex, because to me, well, I was going to generalize, but I mean, there are couples who have great sex together and still have, sex with other people, have open relationships. But I would think that most of the time people open it up because, they don't really have sex or very much sex with each other. So it's basically based on sex. And if not, then to me, it's like, okay, what's missing in your relationship that you need to have an open relationship?
That's a great question. So I think now we're getting into, why people might open up or how. And I think it's true that for some people, they might say, okay, my libido or my sex drive is lower than my partner's, or sex is more important to my partner as like, an interest. Some people like to play cards, play pool table. Other people are like, I want to have sex, right? So maybe there's like, it's less central in somebody's life, and that can be a reason to open up. I am very cautious though about talking about opening up as a way of settling or because somebody is dissatisfied with their relationship. As a therapist, if somebody feels dissatisfied with their relationship, I would specifically say that's not the ideal time to open up. Because to me, an open relationship is a model of how you want your relationship to look. And ideally, it enhances the relationship you have with your primary partner. You feel closer, you feel more connection. And look, I think if people decide to open up because they're dissatisfied with their relationship, one of the fears I have for that couple is that they're going to step outside the bounds of their relationship and they're going to see that, other things do look better. And that's something that happens. It's just a normal thing that happens. When things aren't going well at home, I am going to idealize things outside the relationship. That doesn't mean the next person I find is actually amazing, but I'm going to think that he's amazing because I need a reason to escape the thing I'm having at home. So I'm wary of people who want to resolve a relationship issue or conflict by opening up. Let's think about opening up and open relationships as a spectrum, right? And so some people might say on the first date, this is a model I'm interested in.
Right.
But it doesn't have to happen right away, right? I can tell you from my own experience, I've been in an open relationship, but because we discussed that we wanted it to be something that is fun and validating and adds to the things we talk about and enhances our sex and our sexual energy at home, when things weren't going very well, we decided to close. So if we were arguing or we were in a funny dynamic, we'd be like, you know what? This week, maybe don't go sleep with that person. Or this week, let's not do that because it's going to make the other person feel bad, So this brings me, to the idea of how to have the conversation and some of the things that are key, right? So do you want to open up? Yes or no? What are your reservations about, right? It's quite common that someone will say, I'm worried you're going to like somebody else more than you like me. And that's where communication is key, where you have to say things like, oh no, you're my foundation. Here are all the things I love about you. Here's the thing that I find exciting about this person, but that doesn't mean you're less exciting, right?
Right.
The next big part of that is rules. Do you want me to go into rules?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so people often say communication is key, but then they don't know what the bulk of that is supposed to be. So, number one, who can you sleep with and who can you not sleep with? Your partner probably has a list of people that they're going to be like, you know what? Please don't go near these people, right? Like examples are his exes, people in his smaller community, maybe people he works with, things like that, right? Friends.
Yep.
And then you might say, how do we want other people to know about us? Like, do we want to tell them we're open? Who's allowed to know, right? Some people are going to feel like, you know what? If you tell person X, Y, and Z that we're open, I worry that they're gonna look at us funny. And so it might be part of your rules that you can't tell certain people. So there's people that are out of bounds. And then there's also things that you're allowed to do with somebody else and not allowed to do with them,
Right.
So, whether it's about safety or it's about intimacy, you might say, I don't want you to have condomless sex with somebody else. I want that to be reserved for us. That's a common thing that people will say. Or you're allowed to have this kind of sex with other people, but we reserve a certain kind of sex for us.
Yeah.
The third big thing is communicating about the sex you're having outside the relationship, right? So you might say, you know what, I want to know when you're doing what with somebody, but I don't want to know what you did, right? Whereas other people will say, ooh, let's go for cocktails and tell me all the dirty things you did. You know,
Right.
those are two very different approaches.
Mm-hmm.
And so
The
those
thing
are some
I'm
of the things we have to
getting,
think about.
the thing I'm getting most is that, and this is something I think all of us need to work on more and more. We talk about communication being key, but actually
Yes,
practicing the communication, having the most, probably some of the most uncomfortable conversations you've probably ever had,
totally.
and getting clear for yourself, like what are the things that you really like, or what are the things that you are like, you know what, that would be so hot
Mhm.
from somewhere else, and then communicating to your partner that you're still, like you said, my rock, or you're still like, these are the things I love about you. And if we would validate and say those things more often, like maybe there would be a way to move into some sort of open negotiation without there
Yeah,
being a lot of tension.
totally. And
And there still
we,
probably will be
yeah,
tension.
there will be. And you might tell your partner, you know what, I think it's great. Go have sex with that person. And then they might do it and you might feel bad after. And then you have to be sure not to make your partner feel bad for doing the thing you said they could do, but also to say, maybe we need to renegotiate because I didn't know all of this stuff would come up for me, right? You have to talk about jealousy.
I mean, like you said in a previous conversation, like casual sex is great. It's not always going to be great. There's going to
No.
be times when it's awkward and weird, and that's just one of the risks. Not really. Well, yeah, there's a risk
Yeah.
involved that it might not be.
Mm-hmm. Eddie?
Yeah, I'm listening here, and it's a very difficult conversation or a very difficult topic to talk about because it can look very different. There's so many different scenarios and look very different for different people. Like you said, there's an open relationship where it's like, okay, you know, I know who you're sleeping with, you know who I'm sleeping with, and we're cool with that. Or it's like, okay, don't ask, don't tell. Like we know that we're
Mm-hmm.
sleeping around, but we don't. So there's that scenario.
Yeah.
There is, what if one person wants it and the other person doesn't? And then there's like, okay, like there are couples who are open right from the very beginning, who just can't be monogamous, and so they establish that from the beginning. So you need to find two people who feel the same way. But if
Yeah.
you're in a relationship for a while and you're opening it up, to me the key is there has to be trust.
Yeah.
There has to be
Absolutely.
trust. You have to have such a good bond in your relationship. Like, I know a couple have been together for I don't know how many years, and it surprised me that they opened it up. But I know they will never split up because they are so tight and so
Mm-hmm.
good together.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if they're still having sex with each other. I don't think so. So, but they have a really, really good relationship. And some people will say, well, if you have a really good relationship, because I used to think that if you have a really good relationship, why do you want to sleep with somebody else? Why do you want to kiss somebody else? Why do you want to have sex? But again, people just say because guys like to have sex.
It's not always about sex. I think this is the
True.
thing. It's also about flirting. It's also about going on a date. It's about kissing new lips. Like there's something so fun about, I think, being desired.
But there
Mm-hmm.
you just said something that to me would be like, I can't, going on a date, like that to me is a whole different level. It's like, if you want to go on a date with somebody, then
Mm-hmm.
don't be in a relationship, because to me, that's completely different. You're in a relationship and you're going to go out on a date. That's another, like, I'm going to date. And then, so if the date goes well, we'll have another date. And if the date
Right.
goes well, then we're going to have sex. Then all of a sudden you're in a relationship. So that's another
Yeah.
whole thing to add. Like, is it okay?
So I think one of the things about rules is that we have to be able to say, are you allowed to go on dates? Or is it just sex? And also where, So for example, if me and my partner are spending time together 4 nights a week. Whether we live together or don't live together, that's another layer. But, we have to have our protected time. And then we can say, you know what, there's times when we're allowed to hook up with somebody else and we let each other know, right? And I think it's a common conversation to say, can I have a lead up to that? Like, can I meet somebody in a public place? Can it be a date or just sex? And the other thing is, are repeats allowed, right? For some people, it takes a while to warm up to somebody. We all have body image issues. Having an ongoing casual person can be nice. But maybe your partner says, that doesn't make me feel good. The other scenario is, we agree to say, if you start to have feelings about somebody else, that's when you got to end it. That's not allowed.
Or you have to tell me. Like, that's what I think I got from earlier. You were saying, like, if you open it up, then be okay that you may have to close it. Like, if you've opened it, there may be times when it's not a good idea for it to be open because you're dealing with something very intense, or your partner really needs your support right now. Like, these are things that have to be discussed. Again, coming back to communication.
When Justin and I talked about, okay, like, let's have this queer conversation about open relationships. I know it's not cut and dry, but I kind of naively thought, okay, this is kind of a simple conversation. We're going to talk about, what does it look like and why people go on relationships and what are the rules and all stuff. But I'm realizing through this, it's really fucking complicated. It's not simple.
So it's complicated, but because it's so normalized, I think in our subculture of queer guys, I think we're getting to a point where the conversations are getting a bit more in depth. There's this book, it's a classic by Tristan Taormino called Opening Up. And on her website, she has this opening up checklist, and she has another sheet called Creating an Authentic Relationship. Those are beautiful questionnaires because they have couples start good conversations about what it is they're looking for, what makes a relationship even, Justin, I feel like you were going to jump in.
We're going to put all that in the description, everybody, so you can go take that test and just, if that's something that you know you're heading towards, that sounds like, these resources do exist. There are people out there that have put these things together in order to help you navigate what are uncharted territory for a lot of people.
So there's the Opening Up Checklist by Tristan Taormino. There's also sites like Mojo Upgrade where different people fill things out on their own and then the results get sent to one another. But here's the key thing. Some people rely on external forces to give them structure. They'll say things like, you can have sex with somebody when you travel or when I'm out of town, right? There's inadvertently a kind of structure there that makes it so that we don't have to I don't have to be at home while you're out with somebody else, right? So people figure out things that work for them. And I think the closer to home it is, the more conversation needs to happen. Hooking up with a third when you're on vacation is easier than doing it in your home city.
You're adding to my, what I was talking about the confusion, because now you said, okay, so then you can have it when you're on vacation or when you're traveling, or you have this and you have that. And it's like, oh my God, there's so many freaking things that are involved here.
Right. And the key is that you just discover it, you have as much conversation as you can, knowing that you will never uncover it all and that you are going to have to keep talking about it because maybe you didn't get to the vacation thing. And then you're like, wait, okay. Or you realize there was an easier way to do something, giving you guys what you wanted rather than what you thought it was. Because I mean,
how would you then, from all of this that we said and the layers and the complications and whatever, how would you wrap this up? What would you say to people? Because we know that you don't give advice. What do we say to people? What do we say to our viewers who like me now are probably so fucking confused because there's so many different, again, layers?
Yes.
What would you say? How do we
I would say anyone approaching a relationship or anyone that's in a relationship might do well to say out loud what they would gain from openness and also what they worry about. like, it's not always fun. We have to be prepared to talk about jealousy, and we have to be prepared to be vulnerable with our partners about things that are uncomfortable to talk about sometimes.
I've always said that the key to any kind of relationship, whether it's a love relationship or a friendship or a working relationship, the key is communication. It's individual. Like we can't say what might work for one couple because that may not work for another couple.
Totally.
You have to talk about each other. You have to talk about with each other. Okay, this works for me. This doesn't work for me. And can we come to an agreement?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes sometimes it might end up in them splitting up.
I think we all in our minds have a relationship orientation. The same way we have a sexual orientation, we have a relationship orientation. That means we have a tendency towards openness or monogamous relationships.
Okay.
I would say on your first couple dates, you can talk about those things, but do not be wedded to them. Do not be married to them. Because I think, just as you said, Eddie, people's dynamics evolve together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So see what evolves with the person. Like, can I get a kind of foundation and security with the person where openness is a possibility? Can I have a foundation and security with somebody where being monogamous doesn't feel like a huge loss? I don't feel like I'm giving anything up. Both things are possible. And Eddie, you talked about friends you've had who have, such a solid foundation. And I think being willing to open up or close when you have that solid foundation, I think it can make all the difference.
100%. The communication is key, but involved in that communication is honesty and being able to really share when things have changed. If like you said, it may not at the beginning of the relationship be a priority, but as the relationship grows, there has to be that trust in each other to be vulnerable and share what has changed, and then make choices accordingly together.
Yes, and communication is hard. So you have to be able to answer like if your partner says to you, do you want to have sex with other people because you no longer like having sex with me? Like, that's a hard question, and you have to be ready to answer that.
Totally.
And it could be that they haven't had sex for a long time, and they both they don't want to have sex with each other. So it's
totally
like,
possible.
So it's like, but again, if you're going to open up to me, sometimes maybe there aren't any rules, but I think there would have to be rules. And again, communication, trust. Trust is huge.
There's a lot of pressures from our community to be a certain way. We feel that pressure with our bodies, and we also feel that pressure with relationships. And so it's about tuning into what you want, and then also being open to hearing what your partner wants, and that dialogue will continue forever. I mean, if we've heard anything from people who have been together for 30, 40 years, I mean, there are ebbs and flows to those relationships being that long. And so I think learning how to communicate, which is something we can all do better, it takes practice to have uncomfortable conversations. I'm learning that and learning how to be honest with myself so I can be honest with the people around me. So thank you, Rahim. Love your queer conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
And if you have a queer conversation idea, or you want to be on an episode of Queer Conversations, please send us an email at queer@thequeernetwork.com, and you might end up on the Queer Network.
And remember, everyone,
keep it queer.
Bye.
Bye.
Men are men, and men want to have sex, and gay men want to have sex. That's my fire. Fuck my goddamn fucking life.